What's up, guys? Mitch Pelk back with another episode of Pelk Talk. Today, I interviewed Grant Ament. Grant, while at Penn State, was a three-time All-American, set the NCAA single-season assist record at 96, and recently just got drafted first overall in the PLL draft to the Archers Lacrosse Club. This is a great conversation. I can't wait for you guys to listen. And don't forget, listen as a podcast on the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Now, please let me welcome Grant Ament. What's up, guys? Mitch Pelk back with another episode of Pelk Talk. Today, joined by Grant Ament. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. Hanging in there. What about yourself?
Good, man. Good. Just working out, keeping the stick in my hand, making videos. Nothing much. What have you been up to?
Just about the same. Yeah, I got my last final tonight at
There you go.
6:40. So yeah, the last test of college. So and then
What class is that in?
We get international business. So
There you go.
I'm hoping it's not too much of a doozy, but worst comes to worst, if I don't do too hot, it's pass fail, and it's looking like I'm going to pass the class. So that's all that matters.
Love that. Wait, right off the bat, how do you pronounce your last name?
Ament.
Ament. Okay.
Yep.
You grow up with people like butchering that?
Yeah. I mean, I used to kind of tell people what it was. But then when I got to high school, a lot of the upperclassmen would say Ament, and I, didn't really have the nuts to say anything. Funny story actually. But then when I was a freshman in college, we did roll call the first day, and so a junior does a junior's QC, and coach, I was the first one, and it was literally my first meeting at Penn State, and coach stopped the whole meeting and said, "Grant, how do you say your last name?" And because he said it wrong, and literally I was just like in the front row, like shaking, like it's Amen. and the guys on my team got it right from there on out, but it was pretty scary. Mike Sutton was the guy who was the QC, and he said my name wrong, and he didn't get it wrong after that. Coach held him to that.
So let's start from the beginning. Born and raised in Doylestown, PA, with a family that absolutely bleeds Penn State. What was that atmosphere like?
So I'm in Bucks County. I'm in Doylestown right now, and it was awesome. I have two older brothers. They're twins. They're 27. So we always kind of going to their games. Being the water boy on the sidelines. Dad coached both their teams and my teams. So both in soccer and lacrosse. It was pretty average family, in that aspect. And, I was a pretty average, younger brother, baby of the family, getting dragged all over tournaments and stuff. And, for their teams, I was the water boy and the goalie, the guy who warmed up the goalies. And, it was definitely huge for my engagement in the sport, because I was around older kids all the time, and so them, and then I have some neighbors across the street who one played at Harvard and two played at Air Force. So we have a pretty tight-knit group in the neighborhood, and I think it really just allowed me to kind of blossom into my own type of player.
So was your neighborhood was probably like playing football in the street, like playing basketball on the court? Was that kind of what it was like?
It's not really like we were playing, lacrosse every day. I mean, some days we were playing roller hockey in the cul-de-sac. Some days, it was, knee football or knee hockey in somebody's basement. It's kind of, whatever flew. And I think it's definitely, I benefited from it a lot, because I was playing with older kids and playing a bunch of different sports. I think the best thing for lacrosse players, specifically at a younger age, is to just play a bunch of different sports and tie them into to your own game, which is what I did with a lot of it.
Yeah. You grew up only playing soccer and lacrosse? You playing other sports?
So I played soccer and lacrosse. I wrestled a little bit in middle school, and I never played baseball. Never, always just was waiting, because my brothers played lacrosse. So I didn't skip t-ball. I just would play soccer because I just wanted to play lacrosse. And then once I hit first grade, once I was the age, I was able to kind of put on the boxy huge helmet and, you know, go run around. But yeah, so it was mainly those two sports. And but as I said, like in the neighborhood, football, basketball, baseball, I mean, we played everything. So you know, I definitely have only played really those two, but and wrestling, but you know, have a love for all sports, just given the way that I grew up.
Yeah. What's the age difference between you and your twin brothers?
4 years.
4 years. So
Yep.
would have been senior freshman, or you would have missed them by a year?
I would have missed them by a year, but luckily when we were at school, they both took 5th years, one for a master's, and then my one brother took a master's program, and then my other brother actually was a director of Thon, which is a huge dance marathon. So he was able to stay an extra year. So we actually were able to overlap for my freshman year, which was really cool just to have them on campus. And you know, I would go over there and have dinner with them, and you know, be able to have a little bit of a home away from home in a time when, you know, when you're a freshman, you're kind of on your own. So
that was probably sick.
Yeah, it was
have
awesome.
them around.
And definitely, you know, my friends and I would definitely go over there on weekends and you know, abuse their house a little bit. Probably should have, but you know, they were always awesome and welcoming. Them and their friends of just, you know, coming to all of our games. You know, they didn't miss a home game, and definitely were chirping the away team pretty good. So I imagine there were probably some not so nice words said to some of the Big Ten schools that we played at home that year. But they were awesome and really supportive throughout, and still support me till this day. But certainly bring me back down to earth whenever I need it.
That's awesome. That's sweet. So kind of moving towards middle school, did you grow up playing travel lacrosse?
So no. So I mean, I started, there was a club team right around me when I was in 5th grade. So that was like the first, and we played like 2 or 3 summer tournaments, and that was like about it.
What were they called?
And Bucks Select was the team.
Okay.
So I was in 5th grade, but I was playing like 2 years up with those guys. And then, you know, as I continued to go on, really about 7th, 8th grade was when clubs started to get a little bit more serious. But I really just played township ball and just played for Central Bucks, and, you know, absolutely loved it. And I think one thing that, you know, I've realized is, you know, when it was lacrosse season, I absolutely loved lacrosse. When it was soccer season, I loved soccer. Like I wasn't one of those kids. I think nowadays, kids, you know, are trying to focus so much on one sport so early. It's just like, go out and play.
That's definitely something like I regretted. When I got to high school, I was like, it's got to be lacrosse. And looking back after graduating, it's like, I wish I played like football and basketball every single year. And I think a lot of coaches put an emphasis on that too. But I just think kids are just like, oh, I got to get better at the sport.
Yeah, and I played soccer through high school. I played, you know, until I was a senior in high school. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about it, because I did end up taking lacrosse a little bit more serious after 7th, 8th grade. And, you know, it is the reason that I went to Haverford. But you know, I liked it because not only was I able to still stay in shape and, you know, be able to do those things, but also, you know, the guys that I played with specifically on the soccer team, they were also my buddies from the lacrosse team. And for us, it was really cool to have a sport where not everything's so serious. And we were able to kind of goof off and, you know, be kids. Yeah, it probably aggravated our coach a little bit from time to time, but, you know, we were still pretty good players, and, you know, we were able to kind of just do our thing on the soccer field, you know, and have a little bit, you know, have it be a little less tense than what it would be on your average game day on the lacrosse field.
So like you said, you attended Haverford School. Was that more the lacrosse base, or all your friends kind of went there?
So none of my friends went there. I left all my friends from Doylestown. I was the only kid to go there. And yeah, it was just an opportunity that Coach Nostrand, who he's now at Gilman down in Baltimore. You know, he was part of that process. And I really liked the way that he did things. To give a little context, also, it was when it was 2011 when I was getting recruited. So that was the time when Haverford went 21-0 and we're national champions. And then, miraculously 4 years later, the guys who were recruited, we went 26-0. So it was kind of a ripple effect of that first team. But that and then it was a really good fit for me academically. Small classrooms and stuff. Obviously, the economic difference between where I am versus some kids down there is definitely a little bit different, but that was an adjustment. But yeah, that was kind of the reason. And in some ways, I definitely burned bridges in my hometown a little bit, just because
that's what happens.
Some people didn't agree with my decision, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And at that point in time, for me, I felt that it was the best decision. And looking back on it, I certainly wouldn't be the player I am today and had the success that I have without going there, for sure.
What do you think was the hardest part? Was it being away from home, or just kind of missing your hometown boys?
It was a mixture of things. I mean, like, switching schools for anybody, especially in that time period, like in that 7th, 8th grade, I mean, you're in the middle of puberty, like, there's a lot of things going on. So, there were a few different things. I think the biggest is, I got brought down to earth pretty quickly there. I mean, you go from, being top dog in my town here, a big fish in a small pond, to a pretty, average size fish in an ocean over there.
Yeah.
So there were definitely some moments. I played JV my freshman year and swung up to varsity a few times. And, Coach Nostrand basically just said, listen, we want you to grow a little bit and, get bigger, faster, stronger. And so that's what I did. And, it ended up working out for me. But yeah, I mean, that part was definitely the hardest, was getting just brought down to earth, just because, there's so many different things that, I really wasn't aware of. I thought I was just a hot shot because, that's what I was when, back in my hometown. So I think that was probably the biggest thing.
And when you got there, did it kind of feel like home from the start when you got to Haverford, or no?
There were good days and bad days. I mean, I think the first thing that I remember, my early memories, my friend Chris Sabia and I went to Haverford. We both transferred in 9th grade. He graduated Penn State last year. He was a first-team All-American defender. Still one of my good buddies. And I remember when we got there that first week, because we would go early to beat traffic because we would drive from home, and the assistant coach would have a bucket of balls and we would shoot for an hour before school every day. And that was the standard. And that's we're talking, this isn't the spring, this is the fall. This is September. We're 6 months away from the season. But that was what we did. We hit the wall and we shot for an hour before school every day. So in that aspect, I really liked it because, I was a junkie like that. Like I wanted to get better and I wanted to do everything I could to improve. So in that aspect, it was really positive. And then the negatives, as I mentioned, the economical difference at times was pretty astounding. And then, it's switching any schools at any point in time. Like, you got to make friends and you got to kind of learn your way. And I think that's a challenging thing. I ended up, being able to get in a good friend group and still good friends with those guys, till this day. But, the average, switching school struggles that I think every kid would go through, I think is something that I went through initially. So, yeah, but, pluses and minuses.
There you go. With that whole freshman recruiting class, throughout your 4 years there, was it always kind of the main goal was to chase that kind of team they had when you were in 8th grade?
It was the expectation. It wasn't really a goal. It was like, we're going to be the best.
We're doing this.
And if you look at it, Looking back on it, when I was a senior, we went 26-0. Looking at that team, 3 out of the 10 starters were first team All-Americans last year. So, the talent on the team was, I think we had like 22 seniors, and I think over half of them were going to play D1 or D3. So everybody was pretty bought into it. And it was a pretty special thing to be a part of. And looking back on it, it's definitely amazing to think that we didn't lose a game in a season just because of how hard it is in college lacrosse. As it's just hard to win every game. There's just so many good teams out there. So in that aspect, it's definitely pretty cool to look back on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of graduating Haverford, coming out being ranked 31st in that class. Was that kind of something you struggled with? Were you a big ratings guy, rankings guy, or did you not really care about all that?
I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't look at it. But I don't think it really mattered too much to me. I look at certain points in my career. Like I look when I played JV during my freshman year. I look at, not necessarily being ranked in the top 10, being a top guy, getting cut from the U19 team, certain things like that. I look at all those things and I look back and I'm like, okay, it sucked in the moment, but it really did fuel me for later down the line. And, I look at certain setbacks that I have in my career, and it seems to be right after there's some form of success. So in some way, shape, or form, I definitely looked at it, but I was kind of just always hungry for more, and I think I had different goals than most guys. I didn't necessarily want to be the best player in my class. I wanted to take Penn State and take it to a place that it hadn't been before, and that was my initial goal when I was going into college, and then the rest kind of fell into place as time went on.
I was talking to Rob Pinnell on Monday, and he was kind of saying the same thing. If I never lost that 2009 championship, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I don't think I would be as good as I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the similarities
100%. The Yale game last year in the semifinals, it still pisses me off to this day. And, I think that's, and so it's just competitor.
Yeah.
You just want to win, and that's okay. But yeah, I think those setbacks for me, I look at those things and really try to use it all as fuel and as motivation. And granted, I think we did a lot of great things at Penn State, but there still were some stones left unturned. And I know I gave it up and gave it my all, and I'm happy to kind of hang up my hat at the end of the day. I think it's just trending in the right direction, and that's all I could do at that point.
Kind of you landing at Penn State, what was the recruiting process like for you?
Pretty simple. Once coach laid the offer, I said yes. I didn't really, I looked at Maryland and I looked at Penn State, and basically I kind of narrowed it down pretty early. I knew I wanted a bigger school, and I knew I wanted a school that is not in a city, and I knew I wanted a school that's within 4 hours of my home, because I want my parents to be able to come to every game. And it narrowed down to those two schools. And I probably could have broadened it a little bit, but as you said in the beginning, I'm a pretty big part of a pretty big Penn State family. Mom, dad, my aunt, brothers. I didn't really have a choice. So but once Coach Tambroni came to town, you could see the way that he goes about his day and what he does with our program, that it's definitely something that I gravitated towards. And in some ways, I think he's very similar to Coach Nostrand, who was at Haverford with me. And I think both of them are just very, very similar. They're brutally honest guys, but they love you and they'll work you. And at the end of the day, you'll come out a little bit better than you were before, which is exactly what I think I got out of my experience with him. So it really wasn't that crazy of a recruiting process for me. I committed pretty early, and I never really looked back. I never once questioned should I go to Duke or UVA? Like I didn't want one of those blue bloods. I didn't want one of them. Yeah, I wanted to be something different. You know, my buddies were committed to Hopkins, UVA, all these schools, and I didn't really want to be a part of that. I wanted to kind of create something a little bit different, not necessarily be another name in the record book, but kind of start it. So, and that was kind of the sales pitch that coach gave to me. And, you know, for hearing that as a 16-year-old kid, it's just like I'm ready to run through a brick wall for the guy. So, and still am to this day. So, it wasn't too crazy of a recruiting process.
And I heard on Paul Carter's podcast, Overtime, that your first ever visit was with Travis Crane. And I heard that, I was so surprised because he's been my travel ball coach since like 5th grade. And then when I heard he got the job at Ohio State after I committed, I was so excited. He's the man.
Yeah, T Crane's the man. He's his actually posters right up there for the 2013 season. But that's also one of the reasons I chose number 1, because he wore that, and he you know, obviously coaches at one of our rivals now, but you know, he's a guy that really was just phenomenal in that recruiting process with me, and was just so nice and so gracious with me and my family, showing us around and really trying to get me to come. And you know, he didn't need to do any of that. He didn't have to do it. He was my camp counselor for 1 year, and we just really connected and stayed in touch. So, you know, it was really, really nice of him to be able to do all that stuff, and I'm so grateful for it. And then when I picked when the number 1 was open, I wore number 2 in high school, and that wasn't open. But you know, it was a crazy match that, you know, I was able to do that. You know, from the guy who really introduced me to the program, you know, to be able to wear the same number that he wore, I thought was a really cool thing. And he's an awesome dude. I mean, obviously, you know, and him and I still keep in touch till this day.
It's really one of my guys I know I look up to in all assets of life. Just a really influential guy.
Yeah, he stays true to who he is, and you got to respect that. He just goes throughout his day in a very specific way. It's very similar to Coach Tambroni, in my opinion. I think they're very similar in that aspect.
So when you first committed, did you ever kind of feel risk? Because, I mean, at the time, they weren't like your traditional Penn State like they are now.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely were risks. I think the easy route would have been to go to a blue blood at that time and go to, I mean, if I think about the timing, Duke was pretty good back then, Jordan, Wolf, and, you know, those guys on the team. So, you know, that probably would have been the easy thing. Watching Coach Tambroni and the way that he meticulously crafted, you know, the certain steps that need to happen. You know, I really believed in the vision that he had. And I think that's myself and all the other recruits, because I wasn't the only one who probably could have gone, you know, other places. We have a lot of talented guys, you know, really just believe in that vision that, you know, eventually we're going to be, you know, in the conversation with everybody else. You know, I truly believed in it, and, you know, never really second guessed that guy. He's a guy that I've never really second guessed with anything that I've heard out of his mouth.
So then kind of getting there that fall, playing fall ball your freshman year, was there kind of like an aha moment where you realize like this isn't high school ball anymore? Like I got to step it up.
Not really, to be honest. And that's something that I found, and I credit Coach Nostrand, Coach Patron, and Coach Loving, the Haverford coaches. They prepared us for, and every Haverford guy that's come through Penn State. There was 3 when I was a freshman, and now there's myself. So it's James Shakey, myself, Chris Savia, John Nostrand, TJ Malone. So there's five of us that have gone through. Everybody has said practices are not that different from Haverford practices.
Okay.
The only difference is really athleticism and you know, the size. But the speed of the game was never really an adaptation that I really needed to have. I think, you know, growing up and playing in bigger games, that was probably a bigger thing that I needed to focus on, because I was probably a little immature back then. But, you know, I think that, you know, as for practices, I mean, I kind of hopped right in there. Both Chris Savia and myself, we kind of hopped in, and we were just kind of in the mix right away. And, we never really looked, I never really looked back and tried to improve in certain ways, watching film with coaches and stuff. But really, once I got there, the biggest difference for me, biggest aha moment is definitely, and I think you can probably agree, is the strength and conditioning piece. I mean, it's you think you can push yourself until you have a coach breathing down your neck.
Face. Let's go.
Yes, saying you need to do one more rep, and I'm like, I can't do one more rep. And he's like, yes, you can. Find it in you to be able to do it. I think that's probably the biggest wake up call for any freshman.
Did you put on a lot of weight that first fall?
Not really. I put on some weight when I was a freshman, but I really started to buckle down. That's my like sophomore, junior year, to be able to kind of get on a groove and really just try to follow in Coach Dorn's footsteps and try to really do everything that I can. I was actually just texting with him yesterday. I'm trying to figure out, how I can train for the PLL, because, we're going to be playing for 3 weeks.
I know.
I've never done that before. So, we're going to need to do something different. So we're going to, FaceTime next week and, figure out how we can go about it.
Starting your freshman year, how did you deal with kind of like everyone talking, like all freshmen starting, and playing good or bad, just kind of dealing with the fans, the haters, and everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get those wherever. As I've grown up, like you're gonna get those wherever. You're gonna get guys chirping. You're gonna get guys, talking in your ear. I think there are a few teams in college lacrosse that probably do it a little bit excessively, and there's a point when it crosses a bridge to respect for the game that I think some teams definitely push the envelope on, specifically in the Ivy League. And
would you say it's Yale?
Yale and Penn were pretty bad this year.
Really? Yeah, because Rob was saying it was Yale too.
Yeah, Yale definitely. They definitely throw some chirps. They're the kid covering me, Chris Fake, never said a word. I think him and I just have a mutual respect for each other. And but their sideline was saying some stuff, and but yeah, you're gonna get that wherever. I really do think. I think Maryland was very similar a few years ago, and I think as a freshman, it really did get to me at times, and I didn't do probably the best things possible. So looking back on it, I probably could have been a little bit better, but my motto really is, if you really just trust in yourself and believe in yourself and really are able to bet on yourself, more importantly, it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And that's kind of my mentality. That's been my mentality, ever since. And, there are a lot of obstacles that come in my way, and a lot of people, saying certain things. But the fact of the matter is, I put myself in a pretty good position right now. And, I'm willing to bet a lot that, I'll be able to do certain things that other people won't. So, you got to have that confidence in yourself, and, not really care about what other people think, except for the guys inside your locker room. And, those are really the only guys that I really care about, at the end of the day. And, if you can really learn how to do that, I think it's pretty powerful. Now,
any pregame superstitions at Penn State?
I used to be like, Beats headphones on, like going nuts.
Really? That does not seem like you.
I don't do that anymore. I kind of stopped doing that. I don't even I'll have AirPods in if I'm like stretching, or like, headphones on, and I'll actually just listen to a podcast. I'll listen to like Part of My Take or like Spittin' Chicklets, something like that. Like something that just keeps the mood light. I'll get my body ready, and my body is the most important thing to get ready, but like I won't get really hyped until like they say like the pregame lineup, like, or the national anthem. That's like around when I kind of start to rev it up. Just because I found myself getting like really, really tired. Like I found myself burning out.
So fired up.
Yeah, you get so fired up and amped up. And I really believe that, you only have a certain attention span for, being able to lock into a moment. So yeah, I used to be like that. Nothing really now. I'm kind of just let it fly.
Yeah. So this is probably one of my biggest questions because I don't know how you do it. How do you still get your hands on a pair of the Nike Zoom Vapor Carbon cleats? Because I was looking through Instagram, and those are the best cleats ever made.
So I went to the Nike Ride a few years ago, and I was a sophomore, and we got 2 pairs of those, and okay. I'd saved them for my senior year, and I completely forgot that I had a second pair. So when I was like home, like I was just like cleaning out my closet and I found them. These are brand new. And my foot hasn't grown since then, so that it fit me. And yeah, that's how I got a pair. And then, I ended up breaking my foot in those. So I didn't end up wearing those this year. I wore New Balance cleats this year, but those things, you're a man that knows gear. If you know
for sure.
That's sure. Yeah.
So then junior year comes and you say you break your foot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that kind of your first ever like big injury?
Yeah, it was my first injury ever. I mean, nicked up here and there, but like in like a concussion maybe. Other than that, I really had never experienced an injury, and I've had a few. I've had 3 surgeries in the past 2 years, and or 3 injuries, 5 surgeries in the past 2 years. So, I've had my fair share of anesthesia, and I never thought that I would be the type to get injured a lot, and that I broke both of my feet. And then just had a fluke incident in practice last year. That was why I missed the Cleveland State game, and was banged up in the Maryland game. Had mid-season the tightrope surgery that Tua Tagovailoa had.
Okay.
So it was definitely hard, but it does give you perspective on things for sure.
And how did you kind of take that? Your freshman and sophomore year just having success, and coming into your junior year trying to keep topping that, keep going up, and then you break your foot.
It sucked. I'll be honest. It was horrendous, and there were some pretty bad days when I was just like, why is this happening? And I think anybody who goes through injury, can say the exact same thing that's happened to them. And but I think at the end of the day, it really just drove me. To be a better player and to continue to keep going. And, I think that's when I developed a great relationship with our strength coach, because I was with him constantly doing extra work and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so in that perspective, it really just gave me good perspective and put a little fire under my butt, to be able to just kind of keep me going. And, looking back on it, there were probably some situations I probably could have handled a little bit better, with it. And I think, both injuries definitely mentally took a huge toll on me, specifically my foot injuries. And if you haven't experienced one of those, a season-ending injury or an injury where you're out for 2 months, it takes a pretty big toll on you mentally to try to continue to keep going and see the light at the end of the tunnel, because there are times when you really don't see it. So it was definitely tough in that aspect.
Yeah. So coming back that senior year, what was kind of the mentality going into that year?
And our thought was like, we have the talent to win a national championship. And, our mentality was, you're going to really have to go through us. Like we're not going to lose. We found ourselves losing games as opposed to other teams beating us. I look at specifically the 2 games that we lost. I think the semifinal, we probably could have been a little bit better, but the first game that we played Yale, they beat us. They made a few more plays than us, but they had the ball 80% of the game, and we lost by 1 goal. So we were okay with that. I think being able to find ways to just be a very tightened up team that really you got to run through me to win. Type mentality. I think that's kind of where it shifted, and we found great success with it too, which was really fun to be a part of.
Yeah. So kind of getting towards the end of the season and setting that single season assist record with 96. Is that always kind of something you wanted to achieve, setting goals?
Not really, to be honest. I still can't really believe it, to be honest. Like it still hasn't kicked in just because of the company that it's with. Like Lyle is like on such a pedestal for me, and he's, you know, a guy that I really just I look at some of the stuff that he does and I just try to emulate it. And so more along that, but I never really try to set those types of goals for myself. I just kind of try to do the absolute best that I can in each game. And, you know, I'd be wrong if I told you that, you know, I'd be okay if I had, you know, a goal and an assist in a game when, you know, we had the ball out of the game, like I would probably be mad at myself. You know, I think I just set a pretty high standard in that aspect, but, you know, it definitely wasn't a goal of mine, but, you know, it ended up being pretty cool to be a part of. And I look at it as more of a Penn State record rather than, you know, an NCAA record.
Yeah. Throughout your career at Penn State, when did you realize you had that connection with Mac on the field?
The moment he stepped on campus.
Really?
I mean, he's yeah, you just look at the guy. I mean, he can do so much. And yeah, the moment that he stepped on campus, with that skill set and the way that I was, you know, able to work with him, you know, you'd have to be pretty dumb to realize that, or to not realize that Mac is going to be a special talent. So it was pretty, you know, straight on. And then, you know, it kind of took on a life of its own last year, and I think we complement each other pretty well. And, you know, he continues to work and continues to find ways to get open and to shoot from different angles and stuff. You know, he's evolving even more and trying to become an even better shooter, which is hard to believe that he is still wanting to be a better shooter. So he's just a phenomenal player, awesome friends. You know, he's through and through a great dude.
So then on March 22nd on Instagram, you announced you won't be coming back for your technically 6th year. Was that a hard decision to make?
Kind of because of guys like Mac, because of guys that I you know, grew up with in a sense. But at the same time, like I was done. I knew it. You know, this year was a really big struggle for me. As I mentioned, you know, I got foot surgery in the fall, and then we dealt with infection, so I had to get, you know, 2 more operations done. And you know, there was some struggles to even get back on the field. I didn't practice really during the week. So, you know, and there's no guarantee that would even happen next year, but it's not something that, you know, I necessarily wanted to indulge in. And then also at the end of the day, and I think the 3 other 5th years that aren't coming back, you know, you'll get to a point when you realize it's time. And the 4 of us were collectively at that moment. And I think the biggest thing that we realized is, you know, we put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and more importantly, we left the program a lot better than we found it. And you know, that's at the end of the day, that's the goal, and that's all that you can really do. And you know, we left without any regret, which is something that, you know, a lot of people can't really say. Obviously, we were bummed. But you know, we left everything out on the line, and blood, sweat, and tears in every jersey. And the hope is whoever puts on the number 1 jersey next year does the exact same for his 4 years.
No, that's good. So what do you think you'll miss most about Penn State, not lacrosse wise?
I mean, football Saturdays, as I'm assuming it is for you, like they're unbelievable. Football Saturdays are awesome. Lacrosse is a huge part of it. But, you know, there's just a vibe in Happy Valley that it's kind of indescribable. You know, everybody's kind of on the same wavelength. You know, we all bleed blue and white together, and you know, at such a mass capacity to be able to do that all together. You know, I think that's pretty cool. And then from like a social aspect, like being able to just, you know, separate yourself from a sport and just go out with your friends and be able to kind of just be a person outside of the sport, I think it's definitely something that I'll miss a lot. As I said, I think it's kind of hard to completely tie off lacrosse in that aspect because of how much of an impact that it had on me and my experience at Penn State.
Entering the PLL draft, projected to go number 1 overall, professional lacrosse, was that something you've always kind of wanted to do as a little kid?
Yeah. I mean, that's
I mean, I
goal.
saw the yearbook. That was sick.
Yeah. I mean, it's
funny.
always been a goal of mine to play professionally, to be able to go number one, hopefully in the PLL draft, would be just a dream come true. And more importantly, just to play in the PLL. It was never a goal of mine to go number one. It was never a goal of mine to, go in the first round. It was just to be able to play. And so hopefully, obviously it airs next Wednesday. Hopefully I'll get picked up by somebody, and, be able to put on a uniform for those 3 weeks and, give everything that I can to hopefully bring a championship home to whichever team picks me up.
I was kind of doing my research, and on your LinkedIn account, you said you coached Mesa Fresh in your summer years at college. And now you're coaching alongside Rob Pennell with the Attackmen Academy. After you're done playing, is coaching something you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, in some way, shape, or form. I don't necessarily know what in what form that is yet. I coach individuals, pretty often, and then I like doing smaller camps to be able to kind of be a little bit more interactive with the kids. I find it fun, and I get a lot out of it, especially if the kid's willing to work hard and, really wants to get better. I find it pretty easy for me to be able to do. I think I'm decent at, the technical side of the sport. And I paired up with Rob. We launched the Attack Academy app. It's doing pretty well thus far. And, he's a great mentor and very similar to me, and kind of sees the field very similar. We see the field pretty similarly. So, it was a good connection, and it all started because of Coach Stambroni, because he was his coach at Cornell. Yep. So it ended up being a good fit. And, obviously he's a guy that I look up to a lot, both on the field and off the field, the way that he handles himself on social media standpoint. He's really taken on it's taken on a life of its own, and he's able to kind of do this thing full time, which is obviously my goal when playing lacrosse.
How surreal kind of is that moment? You said on different interviews that you looked up to Rob as a kid, and now working alongside him.
It's a little weird, I'll be honest. I remember his last game when they played Duke. I remember it like it was yesterday. His jump shot that his question mark shot that pinged the goalie with the lefty. It just snuck right by his shoulder. I remember just the tenacity that he played with, and then I've watched him over the years play for the Wizards. I've never really gotten to know him until this past summer, and he's a great overall person first and foremost, and everything that he's done for me throughout my injuries, throughout everything. He was, if I told him I got injured, I remember I told him I broke my foot this year, he called me 2 minutes later, checking in on me. He's a good guy. I think he's a friend first, which I'm glad that I'm able to see that side of him, because I don't think everybody's able to see that. And it's really cool to be able to have that kind of mentor who I really look up to a lot. And he's obviously a friend now, and is really looking out for me, which is invaluable for me at this point in time.
Yeah, I was talking to him earlier this week, like I said, and I was so nervous to talk to him. And then 5 minutes in, he's just a nice guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no way else to put it. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a normal dude. My friends were a little nervous when they heard that I was working with him. They didn't know what to expect, and he interacts with my friends. He's just a normal dude.
Sweet. So last kind of segment here on Pelk Talk. It's called Quick Talk. Just kind of give you a word or a phrase and give me a short response back. So you ready?
Yep.
Food.
Chipotle. I just ate it.
Okay. Biggest hack.
Patrick Foley, Johns Hopkins.
Biggest chirper.
Matt Gaudette, Yale.
If not Penn State, then?
That's a tough question. Jeez. Probably UVA.
Rob said the same thing. That's funny. Best college memory, not lacrosse-wise.
The tailgate. We have an alumni. His name's Tony Dorado. He throws huge tailgates. All alumni, and being able to be involved with those guys and get to know those guys. That's a lot of fun.
Best teammate you've ever had?
That's a tough question. Probably Robbie Black. He's one of my best friends and just a very selfless dude.
Penn State lacrosse.
Big Ten champs.
Last question. You're 23 now. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, geez. Hopefully still playing lacrosse, finding my niche, in some sort of startup with lacrosse.
Sweet. Well, I really appreciate you coming on Pelk Talk, my man. Where can the fans find you at?
Grant Ament for both Twitter and Instagram.
Sweet. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Good luck with everything.
Thanks. You too.